Hi, everybody. I'm Traven Rice. I'm the arts and culture editor and co-founder of The Lowdown, and this is the Lowdown Culture Cast. We've been talking with all different types of culture changers. We're here at P&T Knitwear on Orchard Street. It's a hot summery day all of a sudden at the end of spring here. I'm really excited this afternoon to be speaking with Alexandra Aron, a director and producer based in New York, and she's also the founder and producing artistic director of Remote Theater Project, which was founded in 2018 to develop and tour work by international artists not frequently seen in the U.S. RTP, the theater company, commissioned and produced Grey Rock by Amir Nizar Zouabi, presented at La Mama Theater in 2019, and that was followed by a U.S. tour in 2020. It was at the Public Theater, the Guthrie, Kennedy Center, Kimmel Center in Philadelphia, and also internationally toured. A lifelong arts educator, she was the recipient of a Fulbright grant to Argentina in 2005 and 2006, where she taught theater practitioners in Buenos Aires, and she passionately believes in using theater for social activism. And that's, I believe, how the Remote Theater Project came about. In September 2022, Remote Theater Project produced Embrace the Tangle as part of the Little Amal Walks NYC, which was a project involving over 1,000 community members in the Lower East Side and Chinatown. And the event was a celebration of diverse communities coming together to welcome newcomers like Little Amal, who, for those of you that don't know, was a very large puppet that was
big girl.
Yeah, operated by many people that walked around all around the community. She was a Syrian refugee and stole everybody's hearts in the area. And so I think that brought you to this project, which we'll talk about today, which is the Sara Roosevelt Park project. And that upcoming project, you're getting ready to perform that. So welcome, and why don't you tell us about that project?
Thank you so much. Yeah, so the project is called Thank You for Listening, which has actually been scripted and written by Carmen Rivera, who's my colleague on this endeavor and who is unfortunately unable to be here today. She's a little ill. But we, Remote Theater Project, got involved in the Sara Roosevelt Park project at the invitation of Kay Webster, who is the president of the Sara Roosevelt Park Community Coalition. When we did the Little Amal project here, she was very helpful to us, and she spoke to me a lot about the struggles that they're having in the park, particularly in one area of the park just south of Delancey Street, where there's just various groups that are using the park and that are really unaware of the history and the baggage of other groups that they're sharing the space with. And particularly she was talking about the unhoused community and the Chinese senior citizens, and on top of that, the new migrants who are being housed in hotels around the park, who are being bused here from the southern border. Mm-hmm. And so in the past couple of years, the tensions in the park have been very intense. And
now, just because those communities are bumping into each other, bumping up against each other?
Well, there's a lot of resentment that's been brewing. According to Kay, this is where we started to talk, was about how these communities were feeling resentful of each other. Different groups were getting resources that others weren't getting. And she was explaining that there's no understanding of like the African American experience from the Chinese point of view. There's no understanding of the Chinese experience, and where so many of the elderly people here today who don't speak English came from and what their stories were. And then, of course, these new migrants who are mostly from Latin America, although we met a bunch of people from Ukraine and Russia as well, are total newcomers here. They're temporary, and they're feeling there's a lot of tension around the fact that the city's giving them the resources where there are people who are living in the park and are not being cared for. So I was, and on top of that, because of a lot of the anti-Asian violence in that park, and during COVID, there's just been so much. She said it's just been really, and she said, I wish we could do something to help bridge these communities. And that was sort of a hook for me, because that's a lot of what I feel Remote Theater Project can do, which is allow people to tell their stories just so other people can hear them, people who might not normally listen or be interested. And then the title, Thank You for Listening, which was Carmen's idea, came from the fact that so many people across these groups, as we started to work, would say, thank you for listening. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to tell our story. And so what we did really was, I said, let me just get to know these communities better. I'm an outsider. And we spent the past year offering free theater workshops and writing workshops to different organizations that were working with these different communities, in particular the Open Door Senior Center and the BRC at Delancey, and then an organization called City Relief, which is at the park on Thursdays. They feed people. And then we started to just literally walk in off the streets and knock on the doors of the migrant hotels and ask if we could offer a writing workshop. And so that was how we started to get to know everybody.
And so how do you approach that when you first interact with them? What's the invitation? It was always tea and cookies. Honestly, that was always what we had. We had always had tea, and that was our thing. And so we would offer people a cup of tea and cookies and a chance just to, sit for a little bit. And in different groups, it was different. We were sitting outside in the park with folks who would come by with City Relief, and they'd be eating their soup, and we were sitting at their table. So it was conversation. It wasn't a formal workshop. With some of the other groups, it was a formal workshop. It was like, be here at 3:30 for tea and cookies. And we would do interactive theater games. And mostly I would work with Cantonese and Mandarin translators so it was just, it was pretty fun. And this community is very active. They love to dance. They love to sing. So it was really fun to just be on our feet and actually doing theater games together. The Chinese community.
Yeah. And then it was interesting in one hotel in particular. I speak Spanish, so I was okay to lead workshops in Spanish. But I also I realized that the workshops were much better attended when they were being billed as family activities. And then people would come because they would want their kids to do something. And so we would do these sort of theater games with everybody and have fun with the kids. And then I would sort of ask the kids to go off and do like a visual art project, a little drawing or something. And then I would actually sit and talk with the adults, and we would do writing prompts, very simple writing prompts, and that would inevitably just start unleashing stories, and people would just want to share their stories. So in each venue it was a little bit different, but the aim was always the same, was just to get people to open up and talk about where they came from and where they are.
And so this included a lot of the unhoused people who were there, you said?
Yeah. And so it's interesting. So, I mean, I guess I should jump ahead to say that this is all of this research is culminating in a free public performance in the park. And the idea is that it's a celebration of these diverse communities and experiences. It's fun. It's not, a heavy, oppressive, although a lot of the subject matter that we discussed was very heavy. We wanted to make this a fun afternoon event for families and for everybody. And that is happening on June 8th, and that is going to be with professional actors mixed in with some community members. But we also discovered amazing artists who live on the street, and those are the people we really dug into and got to know really well. And in fact, one young man who was raised in the shelters at 18, had to leave his mother in the shelter, has lived in men's shelters since he was a young man. He's still young. He's maybe 30, and he's an incredible artist. I mean, he has filled sketchbooks with drawings and worlds of his imagination, and we've used some of that stuff in the show. So Carmen has actually, and he was at our rehearsal yesterday and saw what we were doing with some of the ideas that he shared with us, and he was thrilled. So, I mean, we're really just trying to do something that's authentic, and that's there's also something in just the doing of it itself that is its own reward. And then I brought Carmen in the end of last year after we have a huge Google folder full of audio recordings, notes, photos, videos, just stuff that we had collected. And I brought her around to each of these groups and places, and she herself conducted some writing workshops with some of the Chinese seniors. And then just sort of based on all of that, she has woven really three really important stories from each group through this very fun 40-minute piece.
And so what's it about? How does that get woven together for the performance?
Well, she's ingeniously created the character of Sarah Roosevelt Park, which is hilarious. And so the park has a lot of personality and is our narrator, basically, who introduces people and interacts with people. And so it's a very clever, dramatic
nice
device.
It's a beautiful park. We know Mafinda Kalunga very well, and we get it. We belong to that CSA, and we go through it a lot. So
and we talk about Bob, and Bob's a character in our play. Bob is the guy who always sits outside and who's responsible for having created the whole garden,
for opening the garden and closing the garden.
For those
hours, right?
But it was a vacant lot, and he brought in youth to keep them busy. He got them to clear it, and he made the garden. They made the garden, and then they got recognized, and he named it. Yeah. It's a whole fascinating story about that garden. And he's a really important character. So it's his story a little bit that Carmen has taken on.
Lovely. And so once you decided on the thread and the different communities, have you had them get together?
That was always the original idea, was to bring these groups together and do workshops all together and see what came out of that. And that, in the short answer is no, we weren't able to pull that off. That was hard. Not because logistically hard. It was just really logistically hard. It was because, for instance, some of the amazing women in particular that I talked with who had recently arrived from Venezuela, I mean, they're so busy. She's so busy. They're busy working. They're busy going constantly to get this paper, that paper, finding lawyers, dealing with all of that. So I found that it was you had to bring everything to them. You couldn't ask them to go anywhere. When I would say, can you just go? It's just 3 blocks. Go meet me at the BRC and it couldn't happen. But if you were there in the hotel, you could make it happen. And it was similar with the guys that we interacted with at City Relief. They'd be there Thursdays to get that meal, and to be around, but they're not going to show up on time at a place that you're renting for everyone to get together. So we realized logistically this was biting off a little more than we could handle.
But everyone's invited to come see it, right?
No, and it's everyone's invited to come see it. And a lot of those people hang out on those benches around. It's in the pit, that sunken pit area right at Brim Street. And there's just a lot of the people that we've talked to over the past year and a half. I see them they're they're there. They're going to be literally, we're bringing the show into their backyard, into their home. And so my hope very much is that it's really for everybody. Yeah.
And what are some of the common threads that came out of this that you found that tie the three different groups together?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think the hook, our theme has really been home. What is home? Is home, the home you left in China 50 years ago, fighting, a terrible famine and poverty? Or is the home here, or do you take that home with you and recreate it here? Is home your backpack? Is home your family that you're going to stay with no matter what as you move from country to country to country? And that everybody can relate to these very simple human prompts that Carmen always gets people to talk about and write about, which, inevitably, home. Everybody has a home. Everyone has a relationship to a home, whatever that is. And everybody has a memory of, their first crush. Things that are just universal, and that when you dig in, people will eventually want to share with you.
And did you hear any sort of echoing experiences or things that they shared that kind of overlapped?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the feeling of people, of being invisible, of people not seeing you, is something that came up a lot. And people's joy of what they love to eat, their favorite meals, and why they're their favorite meals, and what are connected. That was such an overlapping theme in what I heard from people. Meals that connected them to the people who created those meals, or who the kind of food that they can rhapsodize about. So it's I found that there's been a lot of those are themes as opposed to stories, I suppose. But I do think the feeling of feeling invisible, and also stories in which the ground just disappears underneath you, that you think you're on stable ground and then you're not, and what do you do when everything is shifting and you have to build a new foundation? And a lot of the stories had those elements in common.
Sure. I mean, it sounds like a lot to hold. I know it takes a real skill to ask those questions and then be able to hold the space when people are sharing that kind of stuff. How do you navigate that? Like, how do you...
Well, I think that it's so... I don't really have the answer for that. I think it's more of just a sensibility of asking very simple general questions, and showing an interest, really, and then listening to what you hear, and then asking another question based on that. And once people start realizing that you care, that you're interested, then it starts to and I mean, look, there's definitely people who I remember one moment where someone just got up and walked away, and it was someone else at the table who was commenting on something he was saying, and sort of arguing with him a little bit about, well, you could have done this or you could have done that, and he just got up and walked away, and I felt, oh, okay, like that person's not in a place where they want to be heard. They really didn't want to be. They wanted to be left alone. They didn't want to be argued with. And sorry, it's not a great example.
No, it is. I mean, that's what I would imagine. It's a different way to meet everybody where they're at, which is in some pretty intense situations, obviously.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of laughter. I mean, a lot of it was just sort of silliness of sitting there and on a beautiful day and sharing some cookies and laughing about whatever funny little things were happening around. But you also realize that they can't help it. There's certain limitations to how you can help. I'm certainly I'm not a social worker at all. I would never take on that responsibility. I'm just, I'm an artist, and I'm interested in hearing different people's perspectives.
How did you come to this sort of point where you've gotten to where you want to hear this diverse array of stories?
I mean, honestly, all of the work that we're doing, that's more what I'll call, we sort of have two tracks of work at Remote Theater Project. One is more for the professional productions that we produce and create, and then what we'll say community engagement projects. And I think they're both so important, and they inform each other, definitely. Because the community engagement stuff it's always, what we do is culture to culture conversation. So it's one culture talking to another culture. We started because I wanted to give voice to Palestinians in New York who I didn't feel were being heard. They were being censored here all the time. So we produced Grey Rock, which was written by a Palestinian, performed by a 5-person Palestinian cast. And they came here before the pandemic, and then they came back again right at the beginning of 2020, and we toured. And this was an opportunity for particularly New Yorkers, Jewish New Yorkers, who I feel like don't actually get to hear a very human and other side of a narrative, to come in and experience this in a theater. That was the idea, was to have one culture, in this case Palestine, talk to American culture, and back and forth. The play we just finished at La Mama a few weeks ago is called Lines. It was about Uganda and Palestine. So and then I realized, this is all happening when we were cut off in the pandemic and we couldn't travel and we couldn't do all this international work. And I did a remote interaction with Little Amal when she was walking across Turkey, from Turkey to England, and we did something in Portland, Maine, and I went in there and started to work with community organizations and the Immigrant Welcome Center, and started to discover all of these incredible support groups and voices and young people who were there, who were very marginalized in the mainstream society. And honestly, we just had so much fun. That's how it started. And then because we came here to the Lower East Side in Chinatown with the Little Amal project in person in 2022. And I did some other projects for Little Amal in the city, but this one in this neighborhood really stuck. And there was something about the Jewish Yiddish history of this community, the Chinese history, how parallel they were. It was so exciting for me to put Chinese and Yiddish artists together, to have them co-create this visual art, installation, and then to involve Yiddish klezmer musicians and Chinese percussion ensemble and a Chinese, 30-person chorus. It was just it was really oh my God, this was, and then the way the neighborhood came together, the different organizations that really, really helped us, particularly the Chinatown Partnership, the Chinatown Bid. So that was how it, and then now we've just been doing a whole bunch of projects in this area since, and it's the crossroads of the world here, for sure. And yeah, so it's very rich, I think, artistically.
Me too. I think so too. Definitely. That's very fascinating. I'm really excited to check it out. So how many shows will you do?
Yeah, it's happening Saturday, June 8th, at 2 p.m. and at 4 p.m.
Okay.
So there's 2 shows all on one day. We have a permit for one day. And there's the other thing I should add is that it is going to be a little bit more like a happening. It is a script, and we have a play, and we will do it. But there's another organization called Inside Change from Within, and they work. Carol Prudhomme Davis, she works with a lot of unhoused artists. She photographs their work. She projects them on buildings at night. She organizes exhibitions for them, and they are going to be having painting, canvases where they will be painting and encouraging anyone in the community who wants to come and paint on them. And that's going to be also part of the experience before, in between, and after the 2 shows.
Very cool.
So it's a very site-specific piece, and but I think that it's like a prototype. I feel like this isn't let me do Shakespeare in your park. This is let me ask the park to create a play, and then we will share it with everyone. And I think that I would, hopefully, if it's successful, this could be something that can be done ongoing every year.
I hope it's successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish you the very best with it.
Thank you.